I'm really delighted to introduce to all of you David Cohen, who's the founder and co-CEO of Techstars. And David has been an entrepreneur and an investor for his entire life. David now in his 5th decade of his life, but he has only had one job interview in his life. And he got that one job and then decided never to interview again for another job. So it's a kind of a clear path of a vocation. He's been starting companies ever since then. And the first one was actually the competitor to the company who hired initially after that job interview went successful. Since then, he has founded several companies and invested in nearly 2,000 startups to date, with a combined market cap of approximately $150 billion, such as Uber, Twilio, SendGrid, Full Contact, and Sphero. Prior to Techstars, David was a co-founder of Pinpoint Technologies, which was acquired by Zoll Medical Corporation. Later, David was the founder and CEO of Earfeeder, a music service that was sold to Sonic Swap. He has also had, and that's an interesting part, especially in our YPO context, is what he likes to think of as a graceful failure in between. I mean, this is about the startup world, so a little bit curious to hear more. And David is also the co-author of a book called Do More Faster, Techstars Lessons to Accelerate Your Startup. David, on his private side, enjoys reading nonfiction books and is an avid tennis player and fan, and travels extensively. And of course, actually, this is a sweet invitation here. He loves to be invited to play tennis on his travels, as long as he can borrow a racket. Maybe last but not least, important to know is that he's married, as he says, to the coolest girl he's ever met and has 3 amazing kids. And these kids actually seem to be teaching him always something new. I mean, on my end, I've had 5 kids. I know what it means, the lessons being taught from our children. So that's on my end, David. Let you the floor to tell us a little bit about your experiences, maybe starting with your own company or the flagship company, Techstars, on how do you manage, interact, and engage and use technology actually to manage dispersed organizations. Thank you for joining us, David.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be with everybody, and I'll try to be brief about Techstars, just mostly to give you context. But as Florian mentioned, I've now invested through Techstars as an angel investor and a VC around that activity in almost 2,000 companies. You mentioned the 115 billion market cap, might be closer to 100 now with Uber in the public market tanking, but we'll see how that goes. But what's 10 or 15 billion here or there in market cap in 2 days? So Techstars is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We operate in more than 50 cities globally, where we support innovation activity in a couple of different models. One model is that we run accelerator programs. We have about 50 of these that we run annually. Many of them in partnership with major corporations, for example, Barclays Bank, Amazon, Ford, and many others, that we power accelerators for them, which fund startups in cooperation with those big companies that are relevant to their world. In these accelerators, we fund companies 10 at a time. And so we have batches, about 50 of these batches a year. So about 500 companies a year are going through our acceleration programs. We accept less than 2% of applicants. So we see a lot of things. We see a lot of startups around the world, and a lot of flow. That investment activity, those accelerators are in 13 countries and about 50-ish cities. We also operate in events and community programs in 120 countries, about 1,000 community events a year that we operate. Most notably would be Startup Weekend, which is a 3-day experience of entrepreneurship that happens around the world. So we're about 12 years into this Techstars thing. We have venture capital around the system. We manage somewhere around $600 million of venture capital around the system. and have been fortunate to invest in lots of companies that have grown up to do really well, and learn a lot from them, and also learn a lot from others that haven't done so well. So in terms of this particular topic, maybe the takeaway is we've seen a lot of innovative startups try a lot of different things relative to being distributed around the world. And in fact, Techstars itself is a largely distributed company. We have about, where I'm located here in Boulder, about 50 people, but we're 300 in total. So, most of our team is not with sort of this group that's here in Boulder. And so we've learned a lot about how to manage this team around the world as well. So, I thought maybe I'd make it real for people and maybe frame a few stories, starting with Techstars and some of the things that we do that maybe could be helpful, but then looking at maybe more notable companies. One thing that I was really interested in is this question that someone asked me, what does Warby Parker, Lyft, Houzz, Eventbrite, Avant, Indigo, and View all have in common? And it was somebody that got the answer right. They said, they're all unicorns. Yeah, they're all billion-dollar startups that have been created, but every single one of them has an engineering office in the state of Tennessee, right? And it's a big engineering office. So they have all, just Tennessee, right, chosen that location to build a second office. So, this notion of being much more distributed, not only in your engineering team, but in your broad, even your executive team, as Techstars has in our case, is becoming much more common. And so some of the quick stories I'll tell, I'll start with Techstars, and Florian, please, slow me down or stop me if you feel like, you want to jump in. But, here at Techstars, we talk about the company as being 100% distributed. We used to talk about it as being 70% remote. And there's something about the language and the culture of that language that has been really important for us. When you talk about your company as having remote offices, you're automatically sort of saying, well, it's us and them. And so rather than talking about it's some percentage distributed, we've really started to talk about it as, fully distributed company. There's no headquarters. People say, is Boulder the headquarters? No, it's where some of us are. So we found that language is really important culturally. One thing that we've done is really overinvest in video infrastructure. We have all of our meeting rooms are equipped with really good microphones, really good HD setups. Every meeting that happens is remote enabled. And you have to really invest in that when you have 50 locations around the world where you have these offices. We use tools like Slack, which I'm sure many of you know about, but we try to make them, these asynchronous tools, we try to make them the standard tools. So what we try to do is have a priority and definition for each tool. So Slack is a today or tomorrow kind of tool for us. It doesn't mean it's not a great place to put urgent things. We actually use a different channel for each message priority so that we can all communicate around the world. And one of the channels we love the most, many of you will know WhatsApp. We use something called Voxer that's very similar. It's like WhatsApp, but it's more voice oriented. So one of the challenges you have with building these remote teams is the nuance of communication. So something like Voxer allows you to quickly say something to someone or a team of people and not worry about, are they asleep or are they awake? It's like leaving a voicemail instantaneously, but they actually hear your voice. So we use that as our priority channel. A phone call means, hey, something's really urgent, but Voxer means today. And for us, Slack means today or tomorrow, and email is maybe sometime this week would be great. So having a standard for that, the way that you communicate is something that we've learned. We also try to really visit these remote locations, right? Encourage staff to go between them, make sure our managers show up at them. So that's a little bit about what we learned here. And I thought, maybe I'd share a few stories of companies that are even more distributed. If it's okay if I keep going, Florian, I don't want to.
Beautiful, yes, please.
Okay. I wanted to talk about a company that some of you probably know. It's called WordPress. Actually, it's called Automatic, but most people know it as WordPress. Matt Mullenweg is a mentor here at Techstars. he has a chapter in Do More Faster, the book you mentioned. WordPress powers about 30% of all the websites in the world. So it's the software that powers Techstars.com and probably many of the websites that people on this call are associated with. Matt's company is 100% remote. They have no offices. So this is an extreme example of this. It's not tacking on something. Matt says it's conscious from the very beginning. And his belief system was talent and intelligence are equally distributed throughout the world, but opportunity is not. And he wanted to leverage that notion to create a 100% remote workforce. So WordPress today has 840 employees in 68 countries. Each of those employees gets $250 a month to do what they want for their office. They could go to a Starbucks and work there. They could go to a WeWork. They could, use a local co-working space. They can use it to make their home office a little nicer. And Matt talks about how everybody has a window view and everybody has, they can listen to music and if they want to, or they don't if they don't want to. And then Matt says it's really important that every year they get together. There's a paid trip where they have what's called a grand meetup. It's half work and half play. And they come together with the primary goal of just connecting to get alignment and deeper connections. And here at Techstars, we do something similar once a year called StaffCon. It's like a conference for the staff. And we have that coming up next week. So that's the one time a year we see everybody. And in Matt's case, that's literally everyone coming together. There is no office that even two people work together in necessarily. They do smaller meetups in between at WordPress. They encourage those smaller meetups. And Matt too cited the importance of a language. So distributed is what their company is, not remote, because remote implies there's a center. So Matt also really wanted to cite the importance of that. The other thing they do as a practice that really enables all of this remote innovation is that they document everything. Nothing is allowed to be water cooler discussion. You have to write down your thought process and you have to share it and the tools that they use. So they move as much of their communications as they can online. There are a few other companies that are 100% distributed that Matt told me about. Basecamp, if you've ever used that, Stack Exchange, MySQL, Mozilla. The idea is that they're tapping into the best person no matter where they are in the world, and they're just built for it. So that's why they have people all over the world, and that's why they feel like they can get leverage of great talent and great pricing and maybe a little bit more loyalty too from those employees. Maybe one more
question.
Yeah, please.
Just can I pick up on one word you're saying, loyalty? Sure. Again, in those distributed organizations, leadership, how does get, for example, in your organization, your team, your fair share of you, wherever they are in the world? Because, this is a cultural part.
Yeah. And
then how do you keep people engaged in these organizations before maybe go into some further example?
Yeah, so really over communicating is super important. So you have to say the same thing many times because someone might not be in that. We have a weekly stand-up. Not everyone can attend those all the time because we rotate the time zones proportionally to where people are in the world. So sometimes that call will be at 8 o'clock at night for me, so that someone in Australia or wherever can participate. But we record them all, and we really try to over communicate around everything we say. So we'll do it in multi-channel. We'll say it many times. We'll reinforce it in many different ways. So communication is just harder, and it's just part of dealing with it. In terms of leadership, I think it's showing up. I mean, you have to, when you go to Paris, you have to take the time to have a dinner with all the people that are anywhere near there, right? To bring them together and, again, reinforce those messages. And then you have to be highly available. So we do, our entire leadership team does what we call open door days, where anyone can schedule 20 minutes. And it can be personal, it could be work, it doesn't matter. And we'll all just dedicate a day a quarter to that kind of thing. So just, creating those opportunities and reinforcing those messages.
Thanks.
So I guess maybe one last example that I would give is a company that we think is really unique. It's called Help Scout. It's in our portfolio. They talked a lot about cautioning about being overly async. Maybe sort of, Florian, what you're getting at a little bit, which is, they actually went with their remote offices, and they have several of them with engineering teams around the world. They went to a place where they were too asynchronous. Everything was online. Everything was, sort of digital communication. And their advice was really the right ratio is about 70% asynchronous and 30% synchronous. So, don't forget to have, those in-person meetings. They get their team together twice a year. They get their leadership team together 4 or 5 times a year. And, anytime that they have a topic that, requires some teamwork, they try to encourage, do a quick Zoom call or video call. The examples included, if you're delivering critical feedback, if you're pairing into groups to tackle really difficult technical challenges, you need to be together to do that in some kind of collaborative space. Sync ups and kickoffs of projects, those are the kind of things that would be synchronous instead of asynchronous. And then they have a routine of a daily stand-up, but it's all virtual. So for those that know about stand-ups, it's where everybody in the room just stands there and it's a quick meeting and you say what's blocking you. They do this on Slack. What did you get done today? What are you going to do before we talk again tomorrow? And what blockers do you have? And everyone in the organization does that. So it's very easy for everyone to see what everyone is doing, as they're building and managing their remote teams. So they also just record the heck out of everything, right? So if you can't watch it in real time or can't participate in it, you can always come back and see it. So these are some of the best practices that we've seen and experienced ourselves. And I think the exercise is maybe to, chat in groups a bit about it, but happy to take it wherever you want from here.
Quick question here also on that end. When introducing your background and your amazing story, you talk about this disgraceful failure. Yeah. Could you maybe hint a little bit, because I believe there's not everybody has has the culture of saying failing is good and failing is important. Maybe that's something around that.
Yeah, so we hire 50 managing directors to run these accelerators around the world. They're investors, and we look for failure in their background. And that surprises people because we think you learn more from failure than success. And if you have both success and failure, there's a sense that you can do it, but you've also seen the other side of it, which is great for sort of counseling startups. So we look for that. And actually, my favorite entrepreneur to back as an investor is one who's succeeded and then most recently failed, because, man, are they frustrated about that failure and they want to prove they can do it again. So that's my favorite entrepreneur to back. My graceful failure was, graceful in the sense that most of the money we lost was our own. We returned about 80% of investor dollars, which we felt great about. And, we made a conscious decision that the thing we were doing wasn't going to work and that our opportunity costs were too high to continue working on that thing that we didn't believe in anymore. There were many great companies that were built that did very similar things, but 5 or 10 years later. So market timing felt off. This was a mobile social network, not unlike a Foursquare or something like that, but before app stores. So it was just hard to get distribution. I like to say graceful failure because I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs fail without grace. They don't save any money to shut the business down, and they shut it down as sort of a train wreck approach. And that's not good for anybody. So failure is a part of entrepreneurship, and I think not enough people talk about it.
Great. A quick question to you, because when you, and I think this is an important one. One thing is, of course, you're in the startup world, and you look at the entrepreneurs and how adamant somebody is, what the skill set is to really bring it forward. Now, when it comes to, let's say hiring and attracting the right talent and selecting the right talent, on a digital way, because you talk about distributed organization rather than remotes. And I think that's an interesting thought about that, because we actually investing in, for example, in distributed energy, where you don't have a central part doing energy, but really individual houses with the energy themselves, and that's all connected. But then this is only possible because there's a big AI machinery who basically controls the performance of all of that. How does it work in organizations, when the people are around the world? Does it work similarly when you talk about distributed organization?
Well, I think what you're getting at is keeping everybody aligned and on mission and hiring the right kind of people. And so I think, my experience is that, too many people hire for skills and not enough for motivations. I actually put motivation at the top of the list when I'm thinking about who to add to the team, and sort of alignment with, the mission and purpose of the organization, and having that be really clear to people, even who are being hired in these remote places is really important. So you have to show up and talk to them about those things in order to keep them aligned with that mission. So I'm not totally sure I'm answering the question you were asking, but that's what came to mind.
Yes, in a sense it is. And we have actually some chats going here and some people providing some information, which is, great, because I can invite everybody here to interact. Also, by the way, if you want to put the video on. Face is always nicer. We have Anna, of course, you're looking at. That's the beauty of technology, that we can see each other also. Now, just timing-wise, I believe what we want to do is here, and take it from here, we want to split up into individual groups. That will be done automatically. In the groups, we'll discuss a little bit around the subject and maybe some findings, and afterwards circle back. Each group has initial and moderator. We've appointed 5 to basically work, but then the feedback should not necessarily be given by the moderator. The intention is that you get all the best, the most out of the event. So very good. As we have seen, we have some fallout, some are in. It's a newbie for us using digital event and the breakout sessions, which I think I enjoyed it on my end. Very quickly, can we maybe have the feedback from, I think Choco, you led one group, and maybe also if questions back to David also, so that David can respond or not, because just from feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Florian. Thanks, David. It's great to be here and learn about things, because you learn every day. So this was a learning event as well, because we do function as a virtual company in a way, between a global organization between India and the US. So we kind of function 24 hours, and everyone in the US is in their houses. So we have kind of a head office in New York. So it was good to see how you function as a distributed environment and things like that. And it was interesting that in our group we had Christian from YPO Dallas. So got you that perspective of working position. We had Alberto from Mexico, who's also between Mexico and the UK, Europe, and things like that, and Michael in London. And they actually have 19 different locations in London that people are working out of, but twice a week they come in together. And so one thing was also interesting to see that they do a webcam for every 15 minutes, 15 minutes a day that they do a webcam. And one common theme across was to use Hangouts or something similar and things like that. And personally, we as a company have been researching on Kaizala. Kaizala is a Microsoft product, which is like, it gives you the different facets of WhatsApp, as well as Slack and things like that. And I think the common thread was the new people are all enjoying working in their own spaces and things like that, across social media, and their virtual world in a way where they have friends across, they understand how things are happening and things like that. And one question to the group, which we were thinking was, it does seem to work for services companies and technology companies. And since David has worked across 2,000 companies, does this concept also work for, say, traditional companies like manufacturing or any of the traditional way, the older companies where you still have to have people working, or does you think it's a mantra for all, is the question?
Yeah, I think manufacturing is obviously something where you probably would want some people to be physically present to actually manufacture the thing, but there'll be a lot of people supporting that activity that I think it would work for. When you factor in people's commutes, right? Time wasted, their own happiness, you end up getting more productivity out of people. It's counterintuitive, and I think the sort of older industry companies, older school companies will sort of be laggards in adopting it because of that. But there's a fear that's natural that the people that aren't in the office won't be working as much, but I found you actually get more out of them. They're happier, they're not wasting time in their day. They tend to work more, maybe off hours, so they can spend time with family, and that makes them more loyal and sticking around longer. But I do think it works, but maybe not for some of the central elements of manufacturing, as an example.
And just one last question is, since I have you here, is you use something like a Myers-Briggs or something like that, and to find out what kind of people are more suited to this versus, like, from a psychometric standpoint or something like that, because some people would like to be in the group or something, anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't done that. We try to suss it out in interviews, but we probably will as we grow. And I didn't ask any of the other larger companies if they do that, but I'm guessing some of them probably do a little bit of that kind of profiling.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Florian.
Perfect. Thanks, Choco. The second group, I think, David, you had a group, and then we had 3 groups, and then I was in the third one. Is that correct, Ashley?
Yes, that's correct. David and Greg were in the same group together.
Perfect. So on my end, Scott, maybe you want to give you had some actually concerns, some questions here. Back to you, David. You're still muted.
Unmute. There we go. Hey guys. I think that the takeaway was just the learning and sharing, in the sense of the phrase distributed company. And I think that I've experienced the home office versus the rest of the company. And when the home office is 100 people and the rest of the company dwarfs that, the us versus them mentality. It's this is part of our job as leaders, is to make sure that organization feels it's one cohesive unit. And, I look forward to using, some of the technology that, quite frankly, haven't done in the past, to make sure that, people are touched appropriately and over-touched, to make sure that they understand how important that they are, to the mission of the company and their contribution in it. So that's about it for the takeaway for me. Thank you, David, for your time.
Sure. One thought that triggers is when you say people are appreciated, the other thing we use, that Voxer tool, which is our voice, async voice tool, is I have a trigger on my calendar every 45 days. It pops up as a to-do for me to just share appreciations. So I'll reach out to our senior managers and say, who's done something awesome in your group? And I'll then directly voice Voxer that person, take 30 seconds and say, I heard you did a great job on the project in Bangalore. Thanks so much. And it feels like, wow, the CEO is reaching out to me, but it's so easy to do. So when you have the right tools, you can be thoughtful about those kind of things.
That's great input. David, in your group, is it you or somebody else basically wants to share? What are you discussing?
That was Greg.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I grabbed some notes here. So some of the feedback was that there's some challenges in building software company with distributed teams in 5 or more geographies, and how do you roll out a unified front and unified voice and message? So I think that's just maybe a shared experience that YPO members might have here. There was questions around how to manage millennial talent who come from a different mindset than maybe a different generational demographic. Actually, on that note, David, maybe you could talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, some of what we're talking about in that group was, I don't want to be on the millennials train, sort of talking about them as if they're all the same. But since that seems to be generally what's done, we'll do it. I think they really crave freedom and mobility and flexibility in their work schedule and hours. And I mentioned how Matt Mullenweg from WordPress, really what stuck with me is that phrase that, that intelligence and skills are distributed around the world, right? But opportunity is not. And so, they view it as a huge competitive advantage to tap into that. And a lot of what they're tapping into is those, millennial sort of programmers, right? Designers that are powering the web through WordPress. So, he talked a lot about, some of our people use that stipend that we give them instead of paying for an office. They use that money that we give them to go hang out in Airbnbs in Thailand or wherever they want to be, right? And that creates a lot of happiness, and it's a lot of loyalty, because I would never want to leave a company that I can do that with. And then there's this associated fear about maybe the millennials that, you know, they're holding down this job and doing the bare minimum. But really what I've seen in startups is that when you create that environment for them, they actually do more than the typical employee, because they're not sitting on the freeway in their car or on the train for an hour each way, and they're not miserable about it. And so you end up getting a lot of weekend work and evening work and that, you know, out of people. So, you know, it's sort of tapping into that psyche a little bit and leveraging it.
Very good.
One of the things.
Yes.
Yeah, for, you know, one of the things I was just suddenly got a thought. So one of my clients, they have a threshold saying that if you achieve 95% accuracy, you can still then work.
Yeah, David, actually, there is a question also on my end when we discuss, because our experience, actually, we have 5 office locations in all different continents, and we have a smaller teams there. But the remote people we have or had over time were not the ones who basically stuck with the company, because when they in their town, another company, great feeling, the people meet, they have the coffee in the morning, you know. So therefore we said we'd rather have our people in the same office, 5 offices, or actually Scott is launching a business now with 30 offices around the US. You know, that's something where what is your experience of people purely coming from a home office side? Is that really a long-term way to work with each other, or will they just migrate and move on to a different?
Yeah, I think all these things are choices, and all of them have trade-offs. This sort of notion of home office, there is no office, everyone's fully distributed, working from wherever they want, and nobody's together. That's the WordPress way. It's not what we do at Techstars. At Techstars, we have offices. You know, once we get critical mass in a city, we put an office there, right? But we say you can work there if you want to. And most people choose to at least a few days a week to have that connection. There's a lot of studies that the reason that people stay at a job, the number one reason is that they have a really good friend who works there, right? And also they don't leave their company, they leave their manager, right? So there's a lot of studies about these things. And if you realize that people don't leave companies, they leave their manager, and if they have friends, they tend to stay, then you have to focus on those retention aspects for people who are really sitting at home all day, every day, or else you're going to lose them. So that's one of the trade-offs that you have with fully distributed. In our case, you know, the offices allow us to go and visit. It allows people in the offices to build those interpersonal relationships, to have the little perks of, you know, being in an office, and to have some fun together, which creates more loyalty and retention.
Yeah, good insight. So I would just leave it. Ashley, we have still some time left, correct? So that we could just leave the floor open to maybe some comments or some people around here, because we're not that many.
Yep, 5 minutes.
Perfect. So anybody else wants to do a remark, has a question, has a concern, just taking advantage of having David here on the call with us.
I just want to say something.
Security. Sorry, Michael. Please carry on. You can take your question. I'll take next.
Just a quick one. It's not about the subject of this call. It's about the format. I loved it, like Florian as well. I didn't know that Zoom had this capability. I'm certainly going to try it in my business. It's great. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback, Michael. And actually, yes, Choco, you wanted to question.
My question was, how do you enhance security? Do we compromise on security by having a distributed environment? How do you? I know we all have security stuff, but do you think there's a potential, like, you know, security risks or something like that, and how do you mitigate that? Any ideas on that? Any one of the groups?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think maybe what we do at Techstars is interesting to talk about, because we have 2 teams that are not remote at all. They have to be in, you know, the Boulder office, and we don't hire remotely, at least for certain, you know, roles within those teams, and that's legal and finance. And so they're all here, and they're in a physically secured place. So I think really the thing to think about is physical security. In managing, you know, securities like we do, and a lot of money flowing around between a lot of companies. that physical security really matters. Someone walking through here shouldn't be able to, grab a form or do something with it. But digital security, I think, handles this, right? When you have digital security platforms, they work no matter where you are, or they should work no matter where you are. So I think that's the thing to think about, is what job roles really require that physical security, where you would say, I want that centralized or in a building that I control. And that's going to be different based on different kinds of businesses.
Okay, so before wrapping up here, any other question? Anybody wants to take a last advantage here of having Davey on the call? So wonderful. I can only state, David, thank you for your time. And I got my list of things here I wrote down. Yeah, and actually, in that, I have a question to you, just as thinking out here. You mentioned different tools and how you actually have your reminder, how you engage with the people that you ping, that you leave a voicemail. Do you have to have kind of that selection like in the old way when you started with the iPad and you had to figure out what apps are there and what apps are useful for me? And now you have trillion apps that hang around? Or is there something where there is more, let's say, for a non-virtual person, kind of a starter package to go with, or in order to move it that way?
Yeah, so this whole session's inspired me to write a blog post about the tools that we use. And I don't think it's as much about which tools you pick as having a cultural understanding of how and when you should use each tool. So in our breakout, we talked about Voxer, async voice. For us, that means answer me today. No matter where in the world you are, answer me today, your time. It's an important message. For email, it's we expect you to answer within a week, right? And if you have people that are sending important messages by email to the CEO and expecting an answer the same day, that they're not using the tools right. So we invest in orientation and teaching them, what are these tools that we've picked? You need to use all these tools to help us manage this distributed organization. And you need to understand the priority of the messaging inside each tool. So I'll write a blog post about it because it came up a lot.
Oh, that would be actually beautiful. And once you have that, can you push it here back to the team so we can send that on to everybody, afterwards as a follow-up maybe?
I'll do it for sure. And last comment is, some of you might be thinking, well, maybe I want to open a remote engineering office or something. There, not surprisingly, are startups solving that problem. Terminal.io is one you could look at. It's instant second office. They spin up everything, hire the engineers, have the physical building. So there are startups that are addressing this issue as well, of course, in really innovative ways.
Beautiful. As I'm calling you in from Rwanda, from Kigali, so you have also an office in Kigali?
We would like to co-opt your office, if that's okay, and pretend that we do. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks, David, for your time. That was a very short while call and a nice list of learnings, at least from my end. I think also from the workout sessions in the same sense. Thanks for everybody joining here. And it was a first timer. I hope you like it. And if you like it, it's like a TripAdvisor in a hotel. Make your notes and support it, because I think that's much more entertaining than just the freaking global conference calls initially. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Indeed.
Thank you,
Florian.
David.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.